In the name of God, the merciful and the compassionate, the first plenary meeting of the high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solutions is resumed. Distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege for me to co-chair with His Excellency Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, this high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 78/81 of 3rd December 2024. We would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. This conference is being held to advance the implementation of the United Nations resolutions pertaining to the question of Palestine and the two-state solution for the achievement of a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in the Middle East. As co-chairs, we're pleased to see the high level of attendance today, which reflects the commitment and political will to achieve the goals of the conference. I invite now my co-chair, His Excellency Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, to make an opening statement.
Monsieur le Secrétaire.
Secretary General, President of the General Assembly, Prime Ministers, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Having learned through his history, which is blood-spattered with fratricidal wars, loyal to the foundational principles of the United Nations established 80 years ago, France acknowledges that it is the sacred right of peoples to determine their own fate. There is nothing more precious for people than the dignity of to be free and to be standing on the land from which it takes its roots, because depriving people of these rights inevitably leads to resentment, violence, and war. And that is why France is standing side by side with Israel, when after a long history of exile and persecution, it finally had a land, it finally had a state, and entered into the community of nations as a free people. And the France stood by Israel, mobilizing its diplomatic and military power every time his right to an existence was challenged or threatened. This was done in the name of a millennia-long relationship between France and the Jewish people, and in the name of the rights of people to determine their own fate. France acknowledges and recognizes this same right with the Palestinian people, the right to have their own homeland. And that is why France considers that the only alternative to the long cycle of violence is a prospect of having these two people having two states living side by side in peace and security. And this is the solution that France has been upholding constantly for decades. This was done through General de Gaulle, who in 1967 stated that the settlement of the conflict should be based on the recognition by each of the states in question by all others. This was done by François Mitterrand, who in 1982 stated in the Knesset that a dialogue means a prior and mutual recognition of the right of others to exist. This was done by Jacques Chirac, who in 1996 spoke in front of the Palestinian Legislative Council and stated that the Palestinian people have a natural aspiration to determine their own fate and to have a state. This was done through the voice of all of their successors, and particularly through the voice of President Macron. But we're now at a time where this prospect of having two states recognized and respected in all of their rights is today in mortal danger. It was threatened by the barbarous attack of the 7th of October, the worst anti-Semitic massacre since the Holocaust, by the extraordinary unleashing of savagery and cruelty of the Hamas terrorists in the intimity of kibbutz and on the eucalyptus trees of the Nova Festival. In the disfigured shadows of 1,200 innocents who were brutally murdered then, including 50 French nationals who are still mourning now together with Israel. Through the terrible fate of the hostages who are still in the black hole of captivity and whose immediate return we are demanding. And for those who are still trying to mourn. After wounds going so deep, how can one imagine peaceful coexistence? This idea was challenged and threatened by an indefinite extension of military operations of Israel in Gaza, which for a long time no longer have military or political justification. Massive displacements of populations, civilian victims in the tens of thousands, families turned apart, places of worship, hospitals, and schools bombed, humanitarian food distribution becoming bloodbath. Devastated by war, Gaza is today a charnel house where the corpses are looking famished and the spirits are becoming desperate. After so much suffering, how can we be thinking of peace? This idea is also threatened by the accelerated pace of the settlements in the West Bank, by the extremist settlements who are uprooting olive trees, burning schools, and chasing Palestinians away from their houses under the lenient eyes of the Israeli authorities, by the mixing up of the Palestinian Authority in such a way that undermines the very possibility of a state to exist, and by the Knesset, who last week voted in favor of complete annexation of the West Bank. Given these facts, how can one remain hopeful? On both sides, those who are rejecting these ideas seem to be winning. In those who are saying that the Palestine has to be from Jordan to the sea on the one hand, and those who are dreaming of the great Israel on the other hand, and the idea of the two states is moving farther and farther away. We absolutely cannot resign ourselves to this situation, and we cannot wait any longer because time is against us. After 22 months of attempts, it is an illusion to think that a ceasefire, lasting one, can obtained without a general view of what Gaza is going to be after the war, without a political horizon, an alternative to permanent war. And that is why we undertook the initiative, together with Saudi Arabia, a major great country in the Middle East, to launch a collective endeavor to revive the two-state solution. And we would like to thank all of those countries who have joined us in this endeavor and who have worked tirelessly on this for the past 6 months, because this collective undertaking, this conference convened by the United Nations General Assembly, has already resulted in historic commitments which lead us to a new hope. This was expressed in the letter sent by the President of the Palestinian Authority to the President of the Republic and to the Crown Prince. And this letter, for the first time, he condemns the terrorist attacks of the 7th October. He calls for an immediate release of hostages detained by Hamas, asks for Hamas's disarmament and its exclusion from the governance of Gaza, and confirms towards the end that the payments to the families of terrorists will be stopped. He announces a school reform and undertakes to organize presidential and legislative elections in 2026, and accepts that the Palestinian state will be demilitarized. And there we have all of the conditions stipulated by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his speech in 2009 in Bar el-Inam, when he was talking about the preconditions for the Palestinian state. After that, we had an extraordinary meeting between the Israeli and Palestinian civil society representative on the 13th of June, and they together jointly launched the appeal of Paris to guarantee the security of Israel, working towards a regional integration and towards recognizing the state of Palestine. And this also includes the denunciation by Saudi Arabia and the Arab countries present here today in New York, the denunciation of the crimes of Hamas, the appeal for the for Hamas's disarming, and the expression of hope that they will have normalized relations with Israel and have Israel have normal regional integration. As was stated by the President of the Republic in response to the letter by the President of the Palestinian Authority on the 24th July, in the light of the historic commitments that have already been undertaken and those which will follow, in the name of the eternal rights of people to determine their own fate, at the time where the two-state solution is more threatened than ever, France is ready to fully recognize the state of Palestine and will do so in the month of September next. This recognition, which is a major decision by France, is an expression of both a rejection and it is an appeal. It is a rejection of the idea that the war camp is winning over the peace camp. It is rejection of the idea that Hamas is right when they kept contesting the right of Israel to exist. Hamas who always fought this two-state solution for this reason. But Palestine is not, and it will never be Hamas. Recognizing the state of Palestine today is to bolster those Palestinians who chose nonviolence, who decided to renounce terrorism and recognize Israel. It means creating for the Palestinians the possibility of having an alternative. It's denouncing Hamas and isolating it for good. It is also a rejection of allowing the extremists in Israel to say that the Palestinians have no right to exist, and when they propagate violence through hatred and through the detriment of security interest of their own country. It's a rejection of the resignation that some in the international community and its leaders have when they tend to give up. It's a resignation when they say that nothing can be done. But this is something that we in France reject. We today have an opportunity to save the peace process. It is our historic responsibility, and it is our honor to take this opportunity. This recognition, which is a major decision by France, it is also an appeal, a call, an appeal to all of the people and countries in the world. Please bring in your contribution to this edifice of peace. Rejoin the irreversible trend that we have launched with Saudi Arabia by participating in the meeting of heads of states and governments, which will take place in September at the time of the United Nations General Assembly. It is also an appeal to those countries who have not yet recognized the state of Palestine. It is today that your decision will have the maximum impact on the way things develop. Waiting for Hamas to disarm before you recognize the state of Palestine, this means that you put the decision in the hands of Hamas. Yitzhak Rabin understood it very well because he fought terrorism as though the peace process did not exist, and he pursued the peace process as though there were no terrorism. It is by recognizing Palestine today, that you will create the condition for Hamas's elimination. This is all an appeal to the Arab and Muslim countries. Please cut at the root the rejection of Israel, which is feeding anti-Semitism, extremism, and terrorism. Retake the road of normalization with Israel. Show that the Israelis are winning when they are working on a regional security architecture by bringing everyone together with their neighbors. This requires courage, but courage is something that you have. This is an appeal to the government of Israel. Listen to the indignation throughout the world. Take the hand that's stretched out to you to find a way out of this. Open the eyes to the aspirations your neighbors have to live in peace and security with you. Cease the fire. Lift the humanitarian blockade on Gaza. Lift the financial blockade on the Palestinian Authority. Reject annexation project. It is in the interest of Israel and Israel's security. This is finally an appeal to the two people, the Israeli and the Palestinian people, who have been so tried by history and suffered so much through war, to Raim, which I was 1 year after the 7th of October in El Arish, several kilometers from Gaza in ruin. I have seen it with my own eyes. I've seen the depths into which this has plunged you. Please oppose the violence through the strength of your mind and spirit. Continue with the path forged by Rabin Arafat and those people who were working on peace. Make sure that your children grow up without secular hatred and destructive resentment. Take the rich trail necessary between necessary compromise and intransigence on the essential, because this is the only road towards reconciliation. We are aware of the special responsibility towards peace and security in the world. We are determined to break the spiral of violence in the Middle East. And we are indifferent to the attacks from those who want to dissuade us from doing that. France is ready to fully recognize the state of Palestine and will do so in the month of September. This is to build a new alliance between the people in the region based on justice, mutual recognition, and shared humanity. And to close the terrible chapter on war and to open a long-awaited chapter on peace.
أشكر معالي الوزير بارو.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Barrot, and I will now deliver some opening remarks.
بسم الله الرحمن.
In the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful, Your Excellencies, may the peace of God be upon you. It gives me pleasure to begin by thanking His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of France, and His Excellency, the Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly, and the chairs of the working groups for their efforts to prepare for this important conference, which is an opportune moment to move forward with the peace process. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference is held while escalation continues and the expansion of the conflict continues without any regard for the regional implications and global implications, and with a manner that entrenches impunity. At the same time, thousands of civilians are suffering the worst kinds of serious violations of starvation and bombardment and displacement, and hindering all international efforts to deliver humanitarian assistance to our people in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli violations also take place in Jerusalem and the West Bank, where settlement policies continue and systemic exercises that want to change the demographic and religious nature of the region. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia reiterates that peace and security do not take place through a deprivation of rights or through the force. These policies lead to destabilization and eroding the possibilities for peace and expanding extremism, threatening regional and international peace and security. Your Excellencies, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia reiterates and welcomes what President Mahmoud Abbas has said about the commitment to peace and the continued efforts of the Palestinian government under the leadership of the Prime Minister, Mohammed Mustafa. These efforts deserve our appreciation. In this regard, we reiterate that the international community must support the Palestinian people in building their capacities and empowering their institutions through support for the Palestinian Authority and its reform. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia believes that peace cannot be built without empowering the Palestinian people economically and through development. Accordingly, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is promoting and expanding its cooperation with the Palestinian Authority to build capacity and to achieve digital transformation and to cooperate with the private sector so the economy can advance. In this regard, we mention the critical role of international organizations and the World Bank, including the IMF, in supporting the Palestinian people, whether through financing development or through technical assistance. In light of the increasing challenges, there is an urgent need to continue this support and further intensify it in order to enable the Palestinian people to overcome the challenges to achieve development and stability. And we welcome the grant from the World Bank for the Palestinians. Ladies and gentlemen, since the adoption of the Arab peace process in 2002, the kingdom has continued its efforts for realization of an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital. This is the pillar for achieving a fair and comprehensive and lasting peace in the region. In this context, we commend France's intention to recognize the Palestinian state. This is a measure that reflects its support for the self-determination of the Palestinian people in accordance with international law and international resolutions. We welcome the recognition of a number of friendly states of the Palestinian state. And we call on other states to take this important and responsible measure and to engage in a credible process that is irrevocable to achieve peace and security for all people in the region. We realize we must maintain the political process, and therefore the kingdom has launched this conference and has cooperated with the European Union and Norway, and we are working to operationalize a mechanism that is time-bound to follow up on the outcomes of this conference and to support practical measures to end the occupation and to establish the independent state of Palestine and achieve regional security. In conclusion, we call on you to join the final outcome document and to participate in its implementation. Our collective responsibility requires us today to work urgently to end the humanitarian disaster that is threatening the credibility of the international law and to enable the Palestinian people to achieve self-determination in order to achieve peace and security for all people in the region, opening the way towards stability, prosperity, and development. And may the peace of God be upon you.
أدعو الآن
I now invite His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, to make a statement.
Distinguished co-chairs, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I once again thank the government of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for organizing this international conference on the implementation of the two-state solution. Let's tell it straight. For decades, Middle East diplomacy has been far more process than peace. Words, speeches, declarations may not have much meaning to those on the ground. They have seen it before. They have heard it before. Meanwhile, destruction and annexation bulldoze ahead. The onus and obligation is on all of us to prove that this effort is something different. We know the central question for Middle East peace is implementation of the two-state solution, where two independent, sovereign, democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace and security. My central question to those who stand in the way is this: what is the alternative? A one-state reality where Palestinians are denied equal rights and forced to live under perpetual occupation and inequality? Or a one-state reality where Palestinians are expelled from their land? That is not peace. That is not justice. That is not in accordance with international law, and that is not acceptable. That will only increase the growing isolation of Israel on the global stage. Let's be clear. Statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward. And the denial of statehood would be a gift to extremists everywhere. Excellencies, the only realistic, just and sustainable solution is two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security, within secure and recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both, in line with international law, UN resolutions, and other relevant agreements. Two states recognized by all and fully integrated into the international community. But time is running out. With every passing day, trust is slipping, institutions are weakened, and hopes are dashed. That is why I implore the international community not only to keep the two-state solution alive, but to take the urgent, concrete, irreversible steps necessary to make it real. That means immediately ending violence, immediately ceasing annexation and settlement activities as called by the International Court of Justice, rejecting the forced displacement of the Palestinian population from any part of the occupied Palestinian territory, which would constitute a grave violation of international human rights and humanitarian law, rejecting any form of ethnic cleansing, ensuring full accountability for any atrocity crimes and other violations of international law, restoring credible political dialogue, and reaffirming the equal rights and dignity of both peoples. All this requires courage from leaders on the ground and courage from the international community to act with principle and persistence. Starting with Gaza. Excellencies, nothing can justify the horrific 7 October terror attacks by Hamas, and nothing can justify the scale of death and destruction in Gaza since then, a level without precedent in recent times. Gaza has descended into a cascade of catastrophes, tens of thousands dead, virtually the entire population displaced many times over, the shadow of starvation looming over everyone, all with the world watching. I welcome recent steps to reduce restrictions to life-saving humanitarian aid, but this is far from the solution to end the nightmare. We need an immediate, permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and full and unfettered humanitarian access. These are not preconditions for peace. They are the foundation of it. And let's be equally clear. Beyond Gaza, the continued occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, is illegal. It must end. It is the law, reaffirmed by the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion of July 2024, reaffirmed by this Assembly and rooted in international law. Excellencies, let us reject the false choice between Palestinian statehood and Israeli security. There is no security in occupation. Let us affirm Israel's legitimate security concerns must be addressed, and so must the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. We must speak with one voice to condemn all acts of terror, to denounce all targeting of civilians and taking of hostages, to reject incitement to hatred and violence. And we must call on Israel to recommit clearly and unequivocally to the two-state solution and to cease all actions that undermine it. And we must support Palestinian unity around a peaceful, democratic, and inclusive vision of statehood. Let us lay the groundwork for unified Palestinian governance, credible security arrangements, and a Palestinian Authority that carries out reforms and that can deliver for its people. The Palestinian Authority has taken critical reform steps. I urge the international community to recognize when progress is made and to continue to support the Palestinian government in its reform agenda under incredibly challenging circumstances. Excellencies, this conflict cannot be managed. It must be resolved. We cannot wait for perfect conditions. We must create them. We cannot defer peace efforts until suffering becomes unbearable. We must act before it is too late.
Excellencies, at its core, this is not only a political challenge, it is a matter of shared values and principles. The principle that all peoples are equal in rights, equal in dignity, and entitled to live free of fear. That no nation should live in permanent insecurity, and that no people should live under continued occupation. This is the promise of the United Nations Charter and international law. This is the call of conscience. Let us answer that call with clarity, courage, and conviction. Let us, at long last, choose the path of peace, not as a concept, but as a commitment, not as a dream, but as a reality, for Palestinians, for Israelis, for the people of the Middle East and the world. Thank you.
أشكر الأمين العام للأمم
I thank the UN Secretary General, and I now invite His Excellency Philemon Yanga, President of the General Assembly, to deliver a statement.
Excellent,
Your Excellency, Minister Jean-Noël Barrot.
Your Highness, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, Mr. Secretary General of the UN, Prime Minister Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking France and Saudi Arabia for co-chairing this high-level conference. Bravo, well done. I also commend the co-chairs of the 8 working groups for their efforts in preparing for this conference. Excellencies, we are at a critical moment in the long history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is indeed a history-making moment. The abhorrent attacks of Hamas on 7th October 2023 against Israel caused a war in Gaza, which has been ongoing for over 21 months. we have called for an immediate end to the conflict and the unconditional release of all the hostages. The war in Gaza has brought unimaginable suffering to thousands of human beings. To Palestinian civilians, including women and children, who continue to face death, destruction, deprivation, and displacement on a horrifying scale. And to Israeli hostages, who remain in captivity under extremely painful conditions. This human suffering is unacceptable, and it must end now. Excellencies, the horrors in Gaza and the endless cycle of violence between Israel and Palestine make it painfully clear we cannot go on like this. This conference today is needed more than ever before and must lead to a decisive change in direction. If we do not address once and for all the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through the two-state solution, we will not be able to achieve lasting peace and stability in Palestine and in the Middle East. This is the reason why we have gathered here today. This is why this conference must be a success. And this is why this conference must chart an irreversible path towards the implementation of the two-state solution. We simply cannot afford more excuses and more delays. We must act now. Your Excellencies, last month, the General Assembly adopted a resolution that reflects the urgent demands of the international community with respect to the war in Gaza. The urgent demands include, first, an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire to be respected by all the parties concerned. Second, the immediate, dignified, and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups. Third, the immediate and permanent facilitation of full, rapid, safe, and unhindered entry of humanitarian assistance at scale, including food and medical supplies, into and throughout the Gaza Strip, and its delivery to all Palestinian civilians. The international community must ensure that Israel and Hamas finally comply with these demands and with the obligations under international law and international humanitarian law. Excellencies, while the situation in Gaza is dramatic, we must not lose sight of the deeply concerning and equally urgent situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Violence against civilians, including acts of terror, settler violence, settlement expansion, seizures, demolitions, and forced displacements are eroding any prospects for a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let me be clear. This conflict cannot be resolved through permanent war, nor through endless occupation or annexation. Peace and stability will only be achieved when Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in their own sovereign independent states in peace, security, and dignity. When Palestinians recognize the state of Israel and Israelis recognize the state of Palestine, that will be a good thing. When the world finally honors the legitimate aspirations and rights of both Palestinians and Israelis, when both the state of Israel and the state of Palestine are recognized as legitimate members of the international community and of the United Nations. Until today, more than 140 states have recognized the state of Palestine. The announcement of President Macron that France will be recognizing the state of Palestine in the upcoming session of the General Assembly should encourage more states to take this important step on the way to the realization of the two-state solution. It should also serve to empower those voices in Israel and Palestine who advocate for peace and peaceful coexistence of Israelis and Palestinians. Excellencies, the international community has reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace grounded in international law and the United Nations Charter and relevant United Nations resolutions on different occasions. Now we must translate this commitment into action. It has been 78 years since this General Assembly first called for a two-state solution in Resolution 181. It has been 58 years since the Security Council adopted Resolution 242. Time and again, the General Assembly and the Security Council have reiterated their support for a vision of two states within secure and recognized borders based on the 1967 lines in numerous resolutions. It is our collective responsibility to demand the implementation of these resolutions. The focus of this conference must therefore be concrete and action-oriented, identifying steps the international community must take to realize the two-state solution. We must restore both hope and trust. Hope that a better future is possible. Trust in the United Nations and our commitment to the peoples of Palestine and Israel. We must act now to take the steps necessary to bring about a peaceful settlement of this conflict, one that upholds international law, the United Nations Charter and relevant UN resolutions, and especially one that achieves justice for Palestinians and Israelis, one that ensures a peaceful, prosperous, and equitable future for everyone in the Middle East. Thank you.
أشكر رئيس الجمعية العامة.
I thank the President of the General Assembly, and I now invite His Excellency Mohammed Mustafa, Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, to make a statement.
صاحب السمو الأمير فيصل.
Your Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan, Your Excellency Minister Jean-Noel Barrot, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegations, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. At the outset, I would like to express once again the appreciation of the State of Palestine to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France for their leadership and for presiding over this important United Nations conference. I would also like to thank the states that have chaired the working groups and all the states and organizations participating in this international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution. We have been waiting for long years for a genuine international intervention that would move us towards a peaceful, just, and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian question and the independence of the State of Palestine in implementation of the two-state solution on the basis of resolutions of international legitimacy for many years. And in this period of waiting, we have lost what we have lost, and we have suffered immensely. Therefore, this international conference must constitute a turning point in which positions and decisions are translated into immediate and unprecedented practical steps to stop the genocide and end the Israeli occupation, uphold the Palestinian right, and help an independent Palestinian state on the basis of two-state solution take shape in accordance with the resolutions of international legitimacy, which opens the way towards peace, security, stability, and prosperity in our region for the benefit of all peoples and states. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished delegations, in the Gaza Strip, there are all kinds of death. Palestinians die by being targeted. They die by being burned alive. They die out of the cold, out of hunger, out of thirst, out of disease, out of grief, and out of fear. And they send us every day, every moment, for more than 20 months, a distress call to save them from this killing, destruction, and disregard for their lives. How has this devastating war not stopped for our people yet? How come there's no stop to this countless innocent lives lost? How is it possible that there's no stop to the starvation, which is now a declared policy and a clear plan for displacement? Do not accept from Israel any excuse or justification for targeting Palestinian civilians, doctors, humanitarian staff, journalists, and the imposition of a policy of collective punishment on the Gaza Strip and its inhabitants without exception, as well as the destruction of homes, hospitals, schools, mosques, churches, even graves, and all the elements of life in Gaza, and preventing the entry of aid and obstructing its safe distribution and killing who seek to receive some aid. This war of extermination must stop immediately. The killing of Palestinians must stop immediately. Humanitarian aid must be brought in immediately through all land crossings. Hostages and prisoners must be released immediately. The displacement must stop immediately. Israel occupation forces must withdraw completely from the entire Gaza Strip. And we ask you to take the necessary measures to stop the aggression, starvation, and displacement, and send a clear message. Enough disregard for the life and dignity of Palestinians. Palestinians are human beings. In this regard, we affirm our support for the efforts of the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. We thank them for their effort to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. We also thank all the countries that support our people, their rights, as well as relief efforts, especially the Arab Republic of Egypt and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. We also thank the International Coalition for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution and the Arab Islamic Committee led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Your Excellencies, Your Highnesses, distinguished delegations, we affirm the readiness of the State of Palestine to assume full responsibility for governance and security in Gaza with Arab and international support. We also stress that the State of Palestine is the only holder of the right to rule the entire Gaza Strip, and it is the holder of the exclusive right to maintain security. Israel must withdraw completely from the Gaza Strip, and Hamas must relinquish its control over the Strip and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority. We also reaffirm our position rejecting violence and terrorism in all its forms, including targeting and attacking civilians. And on this basis, the State of Palestine is ready to invite a temporary Arab and international support force to support stability by a resolution adopted by the Security Council in order to provide protection for our Palestinian people and to ensure a ceasefire and to support the Palestinian government and its security services, and not as a substitute for it within a framework that contributes to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state based on international legitimacy resolutions and the implementation of the two-state solution. We're also working with brotherly Arab countries and the international community to reconstruct Gaza and prevent the displacement of our people from their land, including by holding an international conference in Egypt to start implementing the Gaza Reconstruction and Recovery Plan and providing it with the necessary support. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished delegations, as soon as you look at the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, you see the intentions and appetite of Israel government and settlers in annexing the Palestinian land and reducing the Palestinian presence on it and ending it if possible, besieging and exhausting Palestinian government and weakening its ability to carry out and fulfill its governmental tasks through political, financial, military pressure. And the last chapter of these policies was the decision by the Israeli Knesset to annex the West Bank. Hence, the international community must move beyond the time of condemnation and denunciation and move to a stage where it forces Israel to cease its annexation practices, settlement, including settler terrorism and violence, killing and captivity, restriction on movements, attacks, and destruction of villages, cities, and camps, and prevention of return to them. Attacks also on Islamic and Christian holy sites, withholding Palestinian tax funds, as well as threatening to paralyze the Palestinian banking sector in an attempt to destroy the state of Palestine and the two-state solution. Your Highnesses, hence, we stress the importance of holding this conference and the issuance of the UN Declaration for the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution 1 year after the issuance of the advisory opinion of the ICJ. This confirms the beginning of a different approach, different from previous approaches, an approach that is bolder and more capable, that leads us towards the actual implementation of the resolutions of international legitimacy and the embodiment of the independent Palestinian state on the ground and the implementation of the two-state solution on the 1967 borders and the achievement of a future of peace, security, and stability in which all states of the region live side by side and good neighborliness. We hope that the Israelis would seize this opportunity. Your Highnesses, distinguished delegations, we want a free, independent, and sovereign Palestinian state that is modern and developed, that is the source of pride for all the sons and daughters of the Palestinian people everywhere, in which law, peace, and security prevail. We want it to be a state that is not subject to occupation, that is free of violence and terrorism, that adopts a culture of peace, that lives up to the aspirations and enormous sacrifices of our people, that guarantees its rights, freedom, and dignity. In this regard, President Mahmoud Abbas announced at the Arab Summit that comprehensive presidential and legislative elections will be held within a year, as has been done previously in all of our occupied territories, including East Jerusalem, and he asked the international community to provide us with assistance in holding such elections. These will be open elections based on the platform of the PLO and its commitments and the resolutions of international legitimacy under the slogan, one government, one state, and one set of arms. We are confident that this conference will contribute to ending the war on Gaza, ending the occupation, and embodying the sovereign Palestinian state, including by mobilizing political, financial, and economic support for the Palestinian government so that it can strengthen state institutions and implement the reform plan. Towards that end, we call on the convening of a donor conference as soon as possible to achieve these goals. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, heads of delegations, the Palestinian people have the right to live in freedom and dignity in their homeland. And every people in the world deserves to live in peace and security. However, all this can be achieved only through the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Foremost among them is the right to self-determination, the right to return, and the embodiment of the state of Palestine, an independent state of Palestine on the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, to live side by side in security and peace with Israel. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, has recognized Israel for more than 30 years. While Israel's recognition of the state of Palestine has yet to take place, despite the recognition of the state of Palestine by 149 states. In this regard, we call on all states that believe in the two-state solution and have not yet recognized the state of Palestine to do so immediately, as a real investment in peace, security, and stability. We thank all the brave countries that have recognized the state of Palestine, and we appreciate the historic decision of the French president to recognize the state of Palestine. We also call on everyone to support our full membership in the United Nations and other international institutions, including international financial institutions, and to support efforts for accountability and justice for victims. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, we stand ready to work with you and with the United States, and in partnership with the presidents of the conference, Saudi Arabia and France, and with the heads of other groups and countries participating in the International Coalition for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution for Peace, Stability, and Security for All in the region. This requires a serious path and an irreversible peace agreement between the State of Palestine and Israel within a clear and binding timetable, with international support, monitoring, and guarantees, starting with universal recognition of the State of Palestine and leading to the end of the Israeli occupation and the settlement of all final status issues in accordance with the resolutions of international legitimacy. It is not the fate of our people to live under occupation, nor is it the fate of us and the Israelis to live in a war that doesn't end. We can live in a future of peace and security side by side if we make the right decisions today. We must all take bold and unprecedented steps leading to a just and comprehensive peace in accordance with the resolutions of international legitimacy. Enough injustice, war, occupation, and destruction. We want our people to live in freedom and dignity in their land and the land of their ancestors, and to achieve peace, security, and prosperity in our region, the Middle East, which is the cradle of three heavenly religions, the cradle of light, justice, and peace. I thank you. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you.
أشكر دولة رئيس مجلس الوزراء في دولة فلسطين.
I thank His Excellency the Prime Minister of the State of Palestine.
بذلك نكون قد استمعنا إلى آخر المتكلمين.
We have thus listened to the last speaker in the opening segment of this conference. Your Excellencies, Your Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, before starting the general debate, and if the conference approves, I would like to suggest that we would use the rules of procedure of the General Assembly, Mutadas Mudandis, in particular concerning the conduct of its business, and that each state participating in the conference shall have one vote. We shall proceed accordingly.
أعطي الكلمة الآن إلى
I now hand the floor to my fellow co-chair, His Excellency Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France.
J'invite à présent
I now invite His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jasmin Al Thani, Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar, to address the conference.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Your Highness, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Brotherly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Your Excellency, Mr. Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Friendly Republic of France. Your Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, Your Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to express our appreciation to His Excellency President Emmanuel Macron, the President of the French Republic, and His Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for taking the initiative to hold this historic conference under the sponsorship of the United Nations. The conference that tackles one of the longest unresolved issues in terms of the maintenance of international peace and security. Your Excellencies, this conference is a glimmer of hope. However, we are at a critical juncture in the region. A devastating war launched by Israel on the Gaza Strip for more than 2 years, and an escalating humanitarian crisis where more than 2 million people suffer, mostly women and children. And in one of the most brutal and cruel moments in this crisis, we have seen scenes that are a stigma and long lines of the suffering in anguish, waiting for crumbs to end their starvation. How can we build a future on the bodies of those who die of hunger? And how can we reach peace as we see this amount of killing, humiliation, and starvation? In this regard, the state of Qatar has made every diplomatic effort to stem the bloodshed and to have the prisoners and hostages released. In light of our principal position, we have condemned the targeting of civilians. However, we totally reject double standards. Human beings are human beings, children are children, and none of us has the right to decide on the right of civilians to live based on political or racial or other criteria. Starvation and the targeting of hospitals has been used as a method of war in a precedent that we cannot accept, as if these are common practices in any conflict from now on. And the state of Qatar reaffirms once again its total rejection of the use of food as a tool to bring pressure to bear or a method of war or a weapon in war. And we condemn blockade and forced displacement against civilians and defenseless civilians, and the use and the targeting of vital facilities, hospitals, and shelters in a violation of international law and international norms. The efforts for mediation by Qatar, the US, and Egypt did bear fruit, namely the entry of significant aid and the release of prisoners and hostages from both sides. Despite multiple obstacles and attempts to block humanitarian aid and to demonize the mediators, despite all this, we continue in our path towards a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, to end the crisis and to start the effort for reconstruction and recovery. This requires that all parties act responsibly and support all efforts to reach such goal. Your Excellencies, the war on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip did not just lead to immense, unprecedented suffering for defenseless civilians, but it has led to a violation of international law and universal norms on which the international system has been built on since the end of World War II. It has proven that force cannot liquidate the question of Palestine. it has only aggravated the question by adding to the grievances the feelings of hurt and pain that will remain a wound that will never heal. The devastating catastrophe of war and its political failure mean that there is no alternative to a just and comprehensive settlement for the question of Palestine. And the key is to acknowledge that the Palestinian people have been subjected to injustice and to bring about justice that is 80 years late. Based on our principled support for peace, the State of Qatar fully supports the objectives of this conference, and we seek to have an active and a positive role towards the implementation of the two-state solution. And we have co-chaired with Canada and Mexico the third working group on the narratives for peace. And we have addressed in this working group important issues, and we have reached important conclusions that would lead to making this conference a success. To achieve a conducive environment for peace, there is a need to support positive narratives that support peace between the two sides that would be based on relinquishing violence and addressing attempts to dehumanize the other. Your Excellencies, the State of Qatar stresses its firm position vis-à-vis the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine based on the principles of international law and the rules of international legitimacy based on the two-state solution as the only viable practical solution to end the conflict and to achieve just and comprehensive peace. Hence, the State of Qatar calls for a clear and unified international position that rejects all practices that hinder negotiations and chances for comprehensive and just peace. Here, we welcome the recognition by a number of states of the State of Palestine in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip based on the 1967 borders, because we believe this is a vital step towards achieving security and stability internationally and regionally. We also welcome the commitment by the Friendly Republic of France to recognize the State of Palestine next September. Ladies and gentlemen, holding this conference represents the collective will of the international community to translate words into actions and to actively contribute towards the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine in all its dimensions. The international community has a responsibility to create an environment conducive to reaching a comprehensive and just peace, to bring back the strong role of international legitimacy after this horrific war, and to provide humanitarian, economic, and political necessary support. We hope that this conference would represent a turning point that would lead to tangible commitments, not just statements, and would pave the way towards practical steps towards the implementation of the two-state solution, towards a comprehensive, just, and permanent and lasting settlement of the cause, and would lead to stability in the entire region. I thank you.
Je remercie le Premier ministre des Affaires.
I thank the Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of Jordan.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صاحب.
In the name of God, the merciful and the compassionate. Your Highness, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, Jean-Noël Barrot, may the peace of God be upon you. We are here to affirm that there is only one road leading to just peace, ensuring peace and stability for the entire region. The two-state solutions, which puts an end to occupation and oppression, and allows for the creation of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state on the national Palestinian territory, living in peace and security with Israel under international law and in line with the Arab Peace Initiative. We are meeting today at the time where the disastrous impact of the failure of the solution is unfolding before our eyes in the form of death, destruction, hunger, which tramples international humanitarian law underfoot. It makes it into a mere slogan, existing in word but not in deed. The disastrous effects of that are seen in Gaza. Under occupation, it's become a cemetery for its inhabitants and also for our common values. The people in Gaza are dying. We can see mothers crying over their dying children, people who cannot find anything to drink or eat or any medication to alleviate the suffering of people. Mothers are watching their children's short lives ending. We can see it in the West Bank as well, where occupation is gathering pace, where the seizures of land continues, where the Palestinians' blood is being shed, and the holy sites are being violated. And the hope for peace is dying. Peace is the only guarantee for the Palestinians and the Israelis. We can see the arrogance of the State of Israel vis-a-vis the international law. For example, in Lebanon, we can see that, or in Syria, where Israel is invading greater and greater chunks of Syrian territory. At the time when the world is calling for the rebuilding of a new Syria, which is free and stable, where all Syrians live in security, freedom, dignity, and equality. Ladies and gentlemen, this situation, it nullifies our humanity and threatens our collective security, undermines international law and the United Nations Charter, and makes this conflict a threat to the future of the region. The aggression against Gaza has to end. The international community has to prevent the death of another Palestinian children who is dying from hunger or thirst. More than 600,000 children in Gaza must return to school. 2.3 million Palestinians must regain hope and belief in the value of their lives and in their children's future. And that's why the efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States have to be successful to arrive at an agreement which ends the war and gives life back to Gaza. International assistance has to be provided in a way that's unimpeded. All of the crossing points have to be opened. Jordan continues doing everything it can through land convoys and airdrops when Israel leaves us no other choice. Humanitarian assistance and drops cannot be an alternative to land delivery. This is our small contribution to the situation in Gaza, but we will continue doing everything we can to continue helping people in Gaza living through their current situation. The Kingdom of Jordan is ready to cooperate with all of you in this humanitarian duty. The international community has to work and has to be firm and effective to counter the illegitimate Israeli steps which undermine the two-state solution in the occupied West Bank. The ceasefire agreement in Lebanon has to be implemented. Also, the actions of Israel in Syria, which destabilize Syria and usurp the rights of the Syrian people to security and stability, have to end. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference of ours will perhaps not end up with a two-state solution, but it is a message to the region or the international community to move in that direction. Those who have an alternative to the two-state solution, let them come up with it. The Palestinian people will remain on their land and within their rights. All the millions of people in the West Bank and other occupied areas will continue being dehumanized. Do they not have the right to dignified life and freedom and the right to self-determination? The state, a single state for the Palestinians with all of their rights, is it possible, or is it institutional apartheid will remain and will thus bury international credibility? And we make the goal of peace unattainable. The Israeli government is against our meeting here today. They say that negotiations have to end the conflict, but they refuse negotiations and they counter the rights of Palestinians to have a state. They seize Palestinian land. If Israel really wants to negotiate, well, the Palestinian leadership stands ready to engage in negotiations to have just peace. However, Israel does not negotiate. That's the truth. It's time for the international community to react to that according to its belief, which supports the two-state solutions. Practical and clear measures have to be undertaken to support this solution. We have to use all of the tools at our disposal to implement it. Otherwise, the Palestinians and the Israelis will remain without the right to peace, as well as all the people in the region. Just peace is something that has been in the Arab Peace Initiative since 2002. It guarantees peace and normal relations to Israeli. This is support by other organizations. It implies a partnership with Israel engaging in negotiations to translate this pledge into lasting and comprehensive peace. If the two-state solution is not available today, well, protecting it against measures which undermine it is still necessary and urgent. Recognizing the Palestinian state is an important step here. We congratulate France on the announcement that they made to recognize the state of Palestine and all the countries who preceded France in that. And we call on all states to recognize the state of Palestine, reconfirming their right to justice, international law, and peace. The Kingdom of Jordan will continue supporting the rights of the Palestinians to life, freedom, to a state, and will spare no effort to arrive at just peace where the rights of Palestinians are implemented, and they will have peace which will be accepted by the population, which will put an end to the conflict. Dear friends, occupation and peace are opposites. Occupation and security are opposites as well. Only just peace will ensure the security of the Palestinians and the Israelis and enable them to build a stable future, something that we all want. We would like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the French Republic for organizing this conference of ours today, which is an international appeal, a cry saying it's enough conflict, occupation, murder, oppression. It's a collective opposition to that, whereas just peace is our choice, basing ourselves on the two-state solutions. We have an opportunity to have a future which there is only justice and hope, cooperation and not conflict. I thank you.
Des expatriés.
I think His Excellency Ayam Safaji. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Diane Fayon, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia.
I thank the co-chairs of the conference and of the working groups. Your Excellencies, Irrelevant of the perspective one has about Middle East conflict today, we all share one conviction: we are at a historical point. How peace in the Middle East will be pursued is what will define the history our generations write. History is rarely about big words. History is about action or lack of it. The wholes of this organization have observed both, and our nations have shared experiences of those consequences. Suffering or prosperity, justice or inequality, grievance or accountability. When writing history of our generation, Slovenia decided to use the ink of action. And let me name just a few. Together with Ireland, Norway, and Spain, Slovenia recognized the state of Palestine last year and established diplomatic ties shortly after. Together with Jordan and Kuwait, we launched an initiative supporting UNRWA through shared commitments, which enjoys support of over 120 signatories to this day. And we continue to strengthen partnership with the agency. We acted upon the mandate entrusted to us as the Security Council member, pushing for action in the Council and supporting membership of Palestine in the United Nations. We participated in proceedings for advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice and supported action in the General Assembly. We were among the first countries recently to respond to settler violence by adopting sanctions against 2 Israeli ministers. And we have supported any well-intended other initiative along the way, including the US, Egypt, Qatar-led mediation efforts. But our efforts cannot and will not end there. I'm looking forward to signing a memorandum of understanding with Palestine to pave the way for strengthened cooperation. Palestinian ownership is central to the two-state solution. We continue valuing dialogue also with Israel, with the region and the civil society. Our door is always open to build trust. Your Excellencies, we are heartbroken by the devastation and immense suffering of civilians in Gaza. The months-long Israeli blockade of humanitarian aid has resulted in famine spreading across Gaza. Children are suffering the most. We take note of recent temporary measures which are long overdue and definitely not enough. We are appalled by dangerous trajectories in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and we resolutely stand against terrorism and strongly condemn Hamas' barbaric attack on October 7th. We do not need a new blueprint to reverse the course of history, as we already have it. We have international law, and Slovenia calls for its full respect. This includes the decisions of the ICJ, both advisory opinion on occupation as well as provisional measures on Gaza. And I feel compelled to underline that this includes accountability. We once again reaffirm our full support to the work of the International Criminal Court and human rights mechanisms. We also need courage and respect. We simply need more. We all share responsibility. We will be judged by history for our actions as well as for lack of them. That is why I take this opportunity to call on member states to take bold actions, to demand an end to starving civilians, a ceasefire and the release of hostages, to normalize ties with Israel, to recognize Palestine, to support Palestinian Authority, to provide humanitarian assistance and back reconstruction, to foster dialogue, and finally, leadership for peace. I thank you all.
Je remercie.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Xavier Bettel, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and Minister for Cooperation and Humanitarian Action of Luxembourg.
Dear Faisal, dear Jean-Noël, dear friends. Pour moi, venir ici.
For me, coming here was something that wasn't just part of my work, it was a duty. It's a duty as someone who has now been foreign minister for almost 18 months. I've been to Palestine and Israel 4 times, and once I went to Jordan, and countries that are also experiencing the direct consequences of the situation. I've been to Egypt once and Qatar once, and I'd like to thank both of you for inviting us here to keep up the momentum on the situation in Palestine. This situation, when you look at public opinion, is divisive. Some are for it, some are against. Can't we just take a position for peace, for young people, for women, for people who have nothing? Do we have to take a position today which is for Palestine and therefore against Palestine, or for Palestine and therefore against Israel? These are cliches that we want to fall into, that we have to be against each other and not find pragmatic solutions in this situation. I'm also thinking about the hostages from the 7th of October, families who don't even know whether their relatives are still alive. Imagine being in that situation and not knowing what happened to a member of your family. So we need to be brave, to all of us, to be able to forge ahead in one direction towards peace and to ensure that we can live together. For the Palestinian Authority, it's very difficult. And as we saw today, it's very difficult to condemn Hamas. And we know that Hamas, for some, is still the solution in Gaza. To have to explain to young Gazans who have just buried their parents following bombings the night before that they have to find peace with Israel, to say to young Israelis that they have to find peace with Palestinians when some of their relatives are still being held hostage. But that's the reality on the ground. So today, I see a situation that is very difficult to accept, very difficult to understand. And nonetheless, we've understood the reaction of Israel that wanted to have self-defense and defense to the action of the 7th of October. But we need to keep proportions and see what is proportionate today. We have UNRWA. UNRWA was the first agency to have to close, and we can see that the aid that should have been delivered by UNRWA, those on the ground are seeing every day how important they were for health, for education, for humanitarian action. More than 1,000 people have died just going to find aid, to get food. And today, if you don't get shot or killed under bombs, you'll die of starvation following the humanitarian aid that's been blocked at the borders. So this really is an inexplicable, intolerable situation. UNRWA wasn't perfect. We have our report from our ex-colleague, Ms. Colonna, who shows where action needs to be taken, and we've seen the determination from the Palestinians to go in that direction. We've heard from Minister Smotrich Ben-Gvir, who will say that if we occupy Palestine, we will have no more housing issues, to say that a prime minister that's also silent. I was a prime minister for 10 years of Luxembourg, and when I saw something that was unacceptable, I said so. I said that words were unacceptable, and that the silence of President Netanyahu is a fact. After the atrocious words of certain ministers that we've heard in recent days. So I want to say that this is an important time, that Arab countries and Muslim countries today are showing this solidarity, a condemnation of Hamas, because the first question that they ask our country is, do you condemn Hamas? No. We need to ensure demilitarization of Hamas. Hamas can't be an alternative to the Palestinian Authority. We have to have elections in Palestine. We have to do demilitarization. We have to have de-radicalization. But we have to give hope to the Palestinian population that today, if it doesn't see a solution, risks being even more demanding and wanting react to what it's seen. So we need to give hope to young Palestinian people and a future to young Palestinian people. And we need to strengthen the Palestinian Authority. We are seeing that the money from taxes paid by Palestinians is not paid back to the Palestinian authorities by the Israeli government. It's a very difficult situation, but the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg president is leaning in the direction of taking this step in September and to recognize the state of Palestine. And we're being asked, well, will that change anything? Last year, we saw Slovenia, Norway, Spain, and Ireland that already did that. But I hope that this dynamic now, President, will make it possible to make progress. We see great determination to condemn Hamas, or demilitarize Hamas among countries in the Middle East. So we mustn't lose this momentum, and we hope that one day our Israeli colleagues will understand that Israeli security will be peace in Palestine, and that saying today that supporting Palestine is not an act against Israel. On the contrary, it is for a future in security for future generations. Thank you.
Je remercie le vice.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Cooperation and Humanitarian Action of Luxembourg. I would invite speakers to respect the time limit of 5 minutes that is granted to each speaker so that everyone can take the floor. Speakers with longer statements are encouraged to read an abbreviated version of their speech and to submit their full statement to the e-statements@un.org address so that it can be published in the UN Journal. I now invite His Excellency Mohammed Ishaq Dar, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Pakistan, to take the floor.
Honorable co-chairs, Honorable Secretary General UN, Honorable President General Assembly, Honorable Prime Ministers, fellow Deputy Prime Ministers and Foreign Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. Pakistan expresses its profound appreciation to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France for co-chairing this timely conference. We commend your leadership in galvanizing global support for a just, comprehensive, and lasting solution to the question of Palestine. We also acknowledge the important work of the 8 working groups, co-chairs. Pakistan actively engaged in their deliberations and contributed forward-looking proposals to shape concrete outcomes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for over 75 years, the Palestinian people have endured occupation, displacement, and denial of their fundamental rights, including their inalienable right to self-determination. This prolonged injustice is not just a political failure, but a moral stain and a persistent threat to international peace and security. Today, Gaza is a graveyard of international law and humanitarian principles. The death and destruction inflicted by Israel, including the killing of over 58,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, is an unconscionable breach of international humanitarian law, the UN resolutions, and the binding measures of International Court of Justice. The blockade of aid, deliberate targeting of civil camps, hospitals, and aid convoys have crossed every red line of legality and humanity. The collective punishment must stop now. We must immediately act with purpose. It is high time for credible and enforceable international action on the following key priorities. First, an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire across Gaza and all occupied Palestinian territories. Resolution 2735 must be implemented. We commend the efforts of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. Second, full and unimpeded humanitarian access, especially life-saving food and medicine. Humanitarian teams must be protected. Third, reinforce political and financial support for UNRWA, a lifeline for millions of Palestinians. Fourth, international accountability for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Impunity must end. Fifth, the re-inauguration of the genuine and irreversible political process to end the occupation and realize the two-state solution. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinian question is a test case for the United Nations and the world. Pakistan reaffirms its unwavering and principled support for the Palestinian people's inalienable right of self-determination, including their right to viable, independent, and contiguous state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. The outcome of this conference must deliver actionable commitments that, number one, reaffirm the centrality of the two-state solution as the only path to sustainable peace. Two, demand Israel's immediate withdrawal from Gaza and support its reconstruction as envisaged in Resolution 2735 and the OIC Arab Plan. Three, support the OIC proposal to provide international protection for the Palestinian people through the deployment of an international protection mechanism and a timeline for building Palestinian institutional capacity and sovereignty. Four, reject and halt any attempts at the forced displacement or demographic manipulation. Number five, oppose illegal Israel settlements and annexation, especially in West Bank and East Jerusalem. We unequivocally condemn the Israeli parliament's unlawful attempt to assert sovereignty over the occupied West Bank. Six, ensure universal recognition of the State of Palestine and its full UN membership. We welcome France's decision to recognize the State of Palestine and encourage other countries who have not done so far to extend recognition and contribute to this global momentum for Palestinian statehood. Co-chairs, Pakistan stands ready to extend dedicated technical assistance and capacity building support to our Palestinian brothers and sisters in key sectors such as public administration, health, education, and service delivery in accordance with the Palestinian leadership's decision. Pakistan is prepared to contribute to the building of institutions, including through participation in the Arab OIC plan and any international protection mechanism. Let me conclude by saying that justice delayed is justice denied. But when justice is denied for generations, the consequences are even graver. The question of Palestinians has impacted the entire region and beyond. We must give hope to the Palestinian people. The occupation must end and end now. It is time for freedom, self-determination, and statehood, and Palestinians' full membership of the UN. That will be the best guarantee for lasting peace in the region. I thank you all.
Je remercie.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Pakistan. And I now give the floor to the representative of the European Commission.
عفوا للتصحيح يتقدم الآن دولة نائب.
Correction. We now give the floor to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iraq. Thank you, President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express my profound gratitude to Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, and Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly. We thank them for their efforts. We welcome the efforts made by His Excellency Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Mr. Jean-Noël Barrot, Minister of Foreign Affairs of France. And we congratulate them for convening this conference, which enshrines the principle of justice in the Palestinian cause, in the establishment of a Palestinian state, and guaranteeing the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinian question is a moral test for the international system. The international community has sometimes shown signs of bias, and yet double standards doesn't contribute to building peace. The international community must henceforth support peace. The first step in that direction must be an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The delivery of humanitarian aid to the besieged and those in need, the wounded, without conditions or obstacles. The lifting of the blockade and the full provision of protection to civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference could represent a step forward that could prevent further humanitarian disasters in Gaza and in the West Bank. It represents a response to our conscience, to our humanity, to salvage what can still be salvaged in light of the scale of the destruction and death perpetrated by the occupying Israeli forces in a series of heinous crimes against humanity. The policy of systematic killing practiced by the Israeli occupying forces is unacceptable. The policy of genocide and apartheid is unacceptable. Forced displacement, forced transfers is unacceptable. Starvation of the population is unacceptable. Expanding the scale of illegal settlements is also unacceptable. All of this exacerbates the humanitarian crisis day after day. Ladies and gentlemen, here we reaffirm Iraq's unconditional support for the Palestinian question. This is a just and rightful issue. This is the basis for stability in the region. We call on the international community, particularly those states having an influence, to shoulder their moral and legal responsibilities. The occupying entity is responsible for grave violations of international law, of international humanitarian law, and UN resolutions. For our part, we will continue to support international initiatives to recognize the state of Palestine as a fully fledged member of the United Nations. We stand ready to participate in any regional or international effort to support the rights of the Palestinians and to bring an end to the occupation. Iraq's position in support of the Palestinian cause and the rights of its people remains steadfast. That is, the right of its people to reclaim their usurped land. Iraq rejects attempts at forced displacement and condemns repeated attacks on Gaza and the West Bank. We affirm that a just peace and stability in the region cannot be achieved to the detriment of the rights of Palestinians. Iraq is convinced that regional stability will only be realized through the exercise by the Palestinian people of their inalienable right to self-determination and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Thank you.
Je remercie le vice-premier ministre.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iraq, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Tarek Mitri, Deputy Prime Minister of Lebanon.
سيدي الرئيس أشكر الجمهورية.
Mr. President, I thank the friendly French Republic and the brotherly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for calling for this high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution in support of the Palestinian people and in affirmation of their legitimate national rights and the establishment of their independent state as a path for just and comprehensive peace. Mr. President, since the Nakba, Palestine has been suffering tragedies year after year and month after month. Occupation, uprooting, displacement, and exile. These crimes are multiplying before our own eyes in Gaza. The occupier persists in siege, killing, starvation, and ethnic cleansing. It rides roughshod over international law and international humanitarian law. We are therefore called upon to work together and quickly to stop the massacre and to protect the credibility of international law, which is being questioned by those who believe in rights in the face of the arrogance of power. Mr. President, it is no secret that the milestones of the road to political solutions are well known. They were written by the international community with UN ink, and they have been engraved on the walls of this international organization. Resolutions adopted by the Security Council, the General Assembly, and the International Court of Justice have established the illegality of occupation and its practices and have called for a two-state solution. Arab leaders called for a permanent and comprehensive solution to the conflict, including the establishment of a Palestinian state on the borders of the 4th of June 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital, in exchange for peace with Israel. This position has not changed since the 2002 Beirut summit that was initiated by the brotherly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Lebanon remains firmly committed to the Arab Peace Initiative, including the right of Palestinians to return to their homes. Mr. President, On behalf of Lebanon, I thank His Excellency, the President of the French Republic, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, for his announcement of the recognition of the Palestinian state next September on the sidelines of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. We highly appreciate France's principal position, which has been pursuing a policy that respects the principles of international legality and international law. I also commend the firm principled position of His Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who stressed the need to establish a Palestinian state as a condition for a just peace, which gives the Palestinian cause support in the face of the alarming recent escalation that we're witnessing in the Palestinian territory, including settlement, legalizing settlement, killing, displacement, and systematic destruction of educational, social, and relief institutions, foremost of which is UNRWA. These crimes have sparked widespread anger across the world and great popular solidarity with the right of the Palestinian people to live in dignity on their land, which was evident in the positions of the states participating in this conference and has accelerated the recognition of a number of them of the state of Palestine. I mentioned Spain, Ireland, Norway, and Slovenia, which have not hesitated to speak clearly and loudly against force in support of rights. Mr. President, for 2 years now, my country, Lebanon, has been suffering from the horrors of repeated Israeli aggression against its sovereignty, territory, and people. And despite our full commitment to the implementation of Resolution 1701, and despite Lebanon's commitment to the arrangements for the cessation of hostilities agreed upon in November 2024, and despite the Lebanese armed forces assistance provided to UNIFIL forces to deploy along the Lebanese international border and making sure that only state has the monopoly on weapons south of the Litani River. And despite all the effort made by the President of the Republic, the Prime Minister, and our government to reach a state of our government control of weapons on all Lebanese territory. Despite all of this, Israel continues to attack Lebanese territory every single day, violating Lebanon's sovereignty and killing its citizens. It also continues to occupy 5 points inside the Lebanese territory and has established 2 buffer zones, not to mention continuing to occupy the Sheba Farms, Kafr Shuba Hills, and the outskirts of the town of Al-Mari. Mr. President, I take this opportunity from this podium to thank the United Nations for all the support it provides to Lebanon through its agencies, and in particular through UNIFIL, whose role we stress as important in supporting the Lebanese armed forces and in maintaining stability along the internationally recognized borders. Lebanon has requested that its mandate be renewed for 1 year without any modification. And we hope that the Security Council would respond favorably to this request. Mr. President, let this conference be a sign of solidarity that the Palestinian people deserve, and action towards coordination and continued effort to defend and uphold the rights of this people. This will reinforce the full meaning of international legitimacy and enhances its effectiveness. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le vice.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister of Lebanon for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Anita Anand, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Canada.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honored colleagues, the Palestinian question is at the heart of any hope for long-term stability in the Middle East. Despite the complexity of the situation, our collective presence here today reflects strong international support for a negotiated solution, one that ensures Palestinian self-determination and Israeli security, and one that charts a path toward lasting regional peace and prosperity. As Article 1 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights states, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Canada remains firmly committed to a two-state solution, an independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with Israel in peace and security. Canada supports the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, and we endorse the principle of Palestinian statehood. We shall continue to discuss with the Palestinian Authority the next steps in our relationship. A workable Palestinian state needs legitimate, democratic governance that serves all Palestinian people. Crucially important is the Palestinian Authority's commitment to undertake the comprehensive reforms necessary to govern Gaza and the West Bank. To that end, today, Canada is pledging an additional $10 million this year to accelerate reform and capacity building for the Palestinian Authority. Canada's commitment to a two-state solution is rooted in our desire to see the Palestinian people living with freedom and dignity, and to see Israelis live in peace and security also.